I started off playing piano as a child, and that was kind of what piqued my musical interest. I played clarinet throughout high school, but never took it super seriously. I just played what I could in my school and in a few ensembles outside of school. But I didn't initially go to a university for music. I initially started out as a biology major, and I attempted to do that for 2 full years before I finally realized that it just wasn't where my heart was and what I wanted to spend my life doing. So at that point I did transfer to another school, switch majors, and I started studying music education. So I do have an undergraduate degree in music education. I completed student teaching, and I have taught a little bit as some part-time jobs at private schools with instrumental music. But when I was in my undergraduate training, that's when I really got the bug for performing and really delving into literature and finding new works and getting to express them in new ways. And that is what brought me to Pittsburgh here to study at Carnegie Mellon University. So I got my master's in music here and graduated in 2015, and I stayed for an extra year to do a certificate program here, and that was completed in 2016. And since then I have stayed here in Pittsburgh. 2016 is coincidentally the year that we founded Nat 28, and so that was a very natural progression from finishing school, running an ensemble. I also freelance in the area, and I teach privately, and I do have a job also at a music store as a sales manager there. So I have my hands in a lot of different aspects of the music industry. Absolutely, yes. There's a few people. So first I have to give credit to my family and my mother, who had a piano in the house, and that was the first thing. That was just what intrigued me as a kid. I tried to figure it out by myself and wrote some really strange notation of the songs that I figured out so that I could go and practice them later. It was completely incorrect, but and she encouraged me to take piano lessons since I was interested, and that's really, I think, what got the start. Is I had so much personal expression that I could do through that at such a young age. But in high school, it's sort of like middle school and high school age with clarinet playing, I had a really fantastic music teacher there who did the band programs. It was a really small school. There was usually between 100 and 120 people in each graduating class, and so the band itself had maybe 50 people in it at the most. And we had a teacher, Paul Leskowitz, who really looked out for each student and tried to help them each achieve their best. And he would come in early in the morning before school to help me with something that I was having trouble with, and stay late to do the same thing for other students. And that always made a huge impact on me. He also always played too when he taught. He didn't just sit up there and tell us what to do. He would grab his trombone and show us what to do and play along with us. And I think that made a really big difference of, he was truly leading by example. We love the name. So Nat, of course, is a nod to the Pittsburgh Nat, which, as I have lived here for 5 years now, my husband claims I am starting to say, but I don't believe him. But either way, that's a nod to that Pittsburgh term that we all know and either love or hate. It means "and that." So, for example, I might say at this concert, we're going to be playing some music with cello and viola and clarinet and Nat, so you just sort of throw it there at the end, as in etc. And it also is, it stands for New Arts Team. Okay, and then the 28 is a reference to the number of river bridges in the city proper. So that the bridge imagery is something that is really important to us. You might see in our logo, it has Nat 28 and it has a bridge over the top. And we like the idea of building bridges, within the musical community, between us and composers whose music needs to be heard, or between us and people who might not normally come to these concerts, or people who might not think that they're interested in classical or contemporary classical music, and between the players themselves as we make this music together. That's actually a sort of difficult question, just because the ensemble itself is pretty flexible. We try to perform a variety of chamber works. So sometimes we'll play pieces that just have 3 people in it, and sometimes we'll play some that have 10. A typical concert, we will usually have around 12 people total. I think this concert we have 13 people that are performing throughout the concert, but the largest piece I think has 6 people in it. So it's sort of rotating, and we do call on musicians from other ensembles to come and play with us sometimes. The leadership team is definitely more set. I'm the executive director, and so I do our finances and some of the behind the scenes logistics. Zoe is our artistic director, and so she does a lot of that reaching out to other groups and really crafting our vision that we have for the ensemble, and she does the grant writing and all sorts of fantastic work to keep us moving forward. Brian Gilling is our music director and pianist, and he unfortunately isn't going to be here at this concert. We have another pianist, Amari Morales, who's subbing for him and doing a great job. But Brian typically does our roles as music. We call him the music director, and he sort of serves as our final say and like set of ears as far as repertoire selection and making sure that the repertoire we are performing is being performed to the highest standard. He also does some music librarian job and scheduling the musicians as well. So we have sort of an interesting way we've delved that up. And then my husband, Nick Huneycutt, is the percussionist in our group, but he's also our equipment manager. Those are definitely members that are there all the time and have been there for almost every concert for the last 3 years. Absolutely. For example, tonight, one of the violinists you'll see, Jennifer Sternick, she is one of the founding members of Cameratone, which is another new music ensemble in the Pittsburgh area. And I have actually gone and subbed for their clarinetist a few times, and so now she's coming in to sub for us as our violin player we usually use wasn't available. And so we were sort of joking that we're a little bit of exchange students between our ensembles. But it's really great because we're working on similar music, right? We're both trying to champion new 20th and 21st century music, but we have different approaches and different ideas for programming, and so it's really refreshing to come and step into another ensemble and see what they're doing and bring some of that back to yours and vice versa. Probably a few different sections of music that we're trying to highlight. If you look at our past seasons, there's one concert that we have done every year and are continuing to make a tradition, which is the Pittsburgh Composers Project. And so that is definitely a very niche thing that we are trying to uplift the voices of emerging Pittsburgh composers with that. So we have a call for scores that we do every year, and we select 3 winners from that, and we perform their pieces, and give them a small stipend as a prize for that, and give them a nice recording of that piece. And then we put that on that concert alongside a few pieces from more established Pittsburgh composers like the professors at Carnegie Mellon and Pitt and other well-known composers in the area that have arguably been well established at this point. So that is something that we definitely try to do, and that's part of our mission statement, is amplifying the voices of Pittsburgh artists. We also do a series fairly regularly that we call the portrait series, which is again showing the repertoire of just a Pittsburgh composer. So this year we did one for Amy Williams, who's a professor at University of Pittsburgh. And our first season we did a concert comprised solely of music by Federico Garcia de Castro, who has been in Pittsburgh for several years and is the founder and music director of Alia Musica. So that was another sort of collaboration, and again uplifting the voices of Pittsburgh artists. Another section of music that we like to do is sort of the classics of new music, if you will, because there is definitely already a canon being developed, and we call that the Spotlight series. And so our first year we did some music by Steve Reich. So we did the double sextet, which we actually did with Pittsburgh Symphony musicians and Daniel Curtis conducting. That was a fantastic experience, I think, all around. Last year, actually here at Carnegie Mellon in Kresge Theater, right behind me, we did 2 back-to-back concerts of George Crumb music with a dinner break in between to process all of that. So that's something else that we like to do, is to bring out those more well-known works and bring them to Pittsburgh. Other than that, we do like to be pretty creative with our programming for the other concerts. We try to bring in a variety of music and tie it all together with a programmatic theme. It's a rotating panel that does participate in reviewing the music. Each year there will be a member of the ensemble who is on that panel, and we also have composition faculty from outside of Pittsburgh and other composers and other professors that will review that. So we change it every year, but I did get to do that one year. That's a great question, and that's exactly why we have more than one person doing this, because it's really probably pretty impossible to have any sort of standard for that. So we do make a rubric. For me, what I'm looking for as a performer is I'm looking for parts that look thoughtfully written for that particular instrument. I'm looking for kind of thematic ideas that I see developed, that I see transitional material happening between those. I'm looking to make sure that everything is relatively playable. For example, there's not a spot where a percussionist has to go from one instrument to another in 1 second, and whenever you are, looking at that in real life, it's physically impossible to do that. Those are the sort of things that I'm looking for. A lot of times we do permit composers to submit recordings with them, which definitely helps, but sometimes you want to make sure it's a good recording that's being sent with it. We still will look at the scores very thoroughly and try to read some things ourselves within that. I think with the call for scores, that as long as a piece is well written and thoughtful, and I do see something that can be communicated even if it's not upfront, that's not an issue, especially because we invite all the composers to the concert and have them speak before the piece and introduce and give a little bit of context that'll really help the listener have a more engaging first listening experience. Last year we actually did what we're doing now. We had sat down and recorded interviews with the composers beforehand so that we could really let them explore some thoughts and give them a chance to edit that and put it together into a really nice coherent video, and we projected those before each piece. So I think that's always a very engaging thing for the audience, and it's awesome to see the person there who wrote the piece and get to go and chat with them afterwards. So in that context, I think it's a really wonderful space to do that and to introduce music that, like you said, might not be that engaging up front without that outside context. One thing that I have personally done, both with Nat 28 and some of my own personal playing, is I have taken pieces that might be a little bit more difficult for the listener up front, and I've added non-musical aspects to them. So I have created some videos or paintings or other art to be projected behind me as I'm playing. So my master's recital that I did a few years ago was the first time that I really explored doing that. I did a piece by Robert Muczynski, timepieces for clarinet and piano, and I made a painting for each one, and I found a quote about time that I thought really reflected at least something that I felt from each movement, and so I had that painting and that quote there behind me for the duration of each movement that I played. The other piece that I played on the recital that I did this for was New York Counterpoint by Steve Reich, which I think is accessible, but I really like minimalism, and so I realize not everyone does, and that to people can seem kind of boring. It's not that it's hard to understand, it's just the same, maybe might seem too repetitive. I like the meditativeness of that. But what I did for that is I went around and filmed city scenes within Pittsburgh. The first movement, I thought it seemed like just sort of like the hustle and bustle of moving around, the morning commute. And so I filmed a bunch of just little clips of that throughout the neighborhoods here. The middle part seemed very serene to me, so I went and filmed all the great parks that we had in Pittsburgh. And then the last part has a little bit of a jazzy feel, so I went and attempted to find nightlife in Pittsburgh and sort of failed. but I did go and just capture a lot of really nice scenes of the city in the evening. And I put those together just as an imagery to go along with that constant motion that you feel from that piece. And we did use that again then on our Reich concert. So I've found that that's kind of an interesting way to approach that I'm, not limiting my repertoire by what I think will be accessible, but adding maybe another element to the repertoire, to the performance that does make it it gives the audience a little bit of something to hold on to, but you're still performing this interesting, challenging work. So funding is definitely one of the biggest challenges of any ensemble. As you were just saying, Baltimore Symphony is going through a terrible struggle right now with that. We've been seeing that with symphonies all across the nation for the last decade at least. At least that's how long I've been paying attention to it, maybe more. So that is definitely a difficult part. We have to spend a lot of time attempting to, reaching out to donors and asking for donations. Also, we are a nonprofit, so we are able to get some grant funding for our concerts as well. So we have been very fortunate. Zoe Sorrell, as I mentioned, our artistic director, writes us fabulous grants, and we have had some good success with that, which is definitely very helpful. And we've also had some really fantastic and supportive donors that have helped us out a great deal, and we are super grateful to them. That wouldn't happen without them. And really, we have some donors who have given us more than I could ever imagine an individual giving us, and then we also have a Patreon account, which is just a way that people can sign up to give monthly donations, and we have people that literally give us $2.50 a month, and every penny counts. That's so helpful and wonderful. We also do a fundraiser every year. We're doing one next week at Wiggle Whiskey and Barrel House, and the way that's another nice Pittsburgh connection there, that the way that they're hosting the fundraiser is no overhead to us, and we're just getting all of the sales, a little bit of profit goes to us for that. So that's a super amazing way that business is helping to support us for that day. That's a good fundraiser, I think, because it's not very hard to get people to come out and drink whiskey. But that's definitely the hardest part, I'm sure, for any nonprofit or for any ensemble. So one that we've received a few times now is the Opportunity Fund here in Pittsburgh, and then we have also received funding from, I think that one might be the only specifically just a grant, but we've also received funding from Penn State Beaver campus to come and do classes there. We go to there's a music class for non-majors there that we go and perform for every year. We've also received funding from Carnegie Mellon University here to come and do reading sessions with the composers and perform some of their music here. And we've also received funding from University of Pittsburgh European Horizons last year, specifically for a concert that we did of all French music, of living French composers. And we brought a composer, Jean-Louis Agabé, over here from France with help from University of Pittsburgh, and he came here and did some talks, and then we performed his work in the University of Pittsburgh campus. Not very much, honestly, and that's okay. It always helps because concerts are expensive to put on, and we want to be paying our musicians enough, and we're still not paying our musicians what my goal to be paying them is. But we do need to pay them for all those hours of rehearsal and travel to rehearsal and practice and all of that. So between the musicians, maybe renting some percussion equipment, in some cases renting the venue, things add up pretty quickly, and so concerts are very expensive to put on, so that ticket income definitely helps everything even out a little bit, but it's a pretty small percentage of the overall donations. For a concert, it really depends on where it is and when. Usually anywhere in like the 50 to 100 range at this point. I hope that we will have grown and expanded a great deal. I hope that the Pittsburgh Composers Project is still going strong. It grows every year and has already gained quite a following in those 3 years. I hope that we will be working more with colleges and universities. I personally did not get to experience new music, as it were, until I came to Carnegie Mellon and worked with the contemporary ensemble here, and that's when I met a lot of my colleagues that are in Nat 28 now, and that's when I really got interested in working with living composers and exploring new music. And so I think it would be a great service to be able to bring what we're doing to some of those smaller universities that might not have that opportunity, but also to come to universities to make great recordings and workshop with composers and things like that. So I know that pursuing residencies at various universities is something that we would like to add to what we're doing. Obviously, larger collaborations is something that I think I would like to see in the future, working with more Pittsburgh artists and not necessarily musicians, dancers, maybe visual artists of certain kinds, lighting artists. I would like to see a lot more large-scale collaborations going on with us as well, and more recognition of the Pittsburgh music scene beyond Pittsburgh.